The truth be told was that I was lounging in the park one day, and the hand of God himself came down from the heavens.
Ow. Well, I tried skydiving, and I just don't think it's for me. The Brotherhood of Nod just might be the most iconic faction in all of Command & Conquer. Once an economic powerhouse in the 1990s, a religious movement, a quasi-nation state, a terrorist organization, all under the seemingly eternal command of a charismatic messianic madman known only as Kane. Now, I hate to get political, but in this house, we support GDI. But seeing as how my last 2 video essays in the Tiberian universe were all about GDI, I think it's time to give the faithful of Nod a few videos to explore one of the most beloved villainous factions in all of RTS. This will be a multi-part series, and today I was planning on covering Nod during the First Tiberian War, but it turns out there is so much more lore about this organization than I had anticipated, even prior to the 1990s. Allow me to explain.
Yes. Power shifts more quickly than some people think. I am Kane.
There is no Brotherhood of Nod without Kane, so we must start with him. And boy did I go down the rabbit hole in finding obscure bits of lore, behind-the-scenes notes, and errant strands of dialogue and cutscenes to pin down exactly who and what Kane is. When we first meet the bald, bearded man in the original 1995 Command & Conquer game, retroactively titled Tiberian Dawn, he doesn't seem very remarkable. Just another 1990s terrorist leader in an era where there were many like him. There does seem to be an odd cult of personality around him within the Brotherhood, and he's very adept at guerrilla strategy and media manipulation. But that appears to be all. Until we reach the end of the single-player campaign, when an odd-looking red and black slab of stone is lifted from the rubble of the Temple of Nod. It's placed in a museum, where, even in the 1990s DOS resolution of its day, it looks very much like an ancient depiction of the biblical story of Cain and Abel. For those of you unfamiliar with the story, allow old Snowman to take you to Sunday school. In the Hebrew scriptures, Cain and Abel are the first sons born to Adam and Eve, the first humans created by God. The story takes place after Adam and Eve were forced out of the Garden of Eden for eating the forbidden fruit and sinning against God, bringing evil into the world. One day, Cain and Abel both bring a sacrifice to God. Now, Cain was a farmer. He brought some of the fruits he cultivated, while Abel, a shepherd, brought fat portions from the firstborn of his flock. It's implied here that Cain was giving the bare minimum as his sacrifice to God, while Abel was giving the very best of his flocks as a sacrifice. Therefore, God looked on Abel and his offering with favor, but did not do the same with Cain's sacrifice. And this enraged Cain. God, being the all-knowing entity that he is, urged Cain that if he simply did what was right, he too would be accepted, warning him that sin was crouching at his door, and that it desired to have him, and that Cain must fight back against it. But rather than improve the quality of his sacrifices, Cain gave in to his jealousy, and instead tricked his brother Abel into getting him alone, and then attacked him and murdered him. According to the Bible, this was the very first murder a human had ever committed. God, of course, knew what Cain had done, and proclaimed that Abel's blood had cried out to God for justice, and that Cain was now under a curse. Cain would no longer be able to produce food from farming, and he would be doomed to be a restless wanderer on the earth for the rest of his days. Cain despaired at the news of his curse, claiming that, as a wanderer, he would now be vulnerable to being killed by whoever found him. However, God reassured him that anyone who killed him would suffer vengeance 7 times over, and then gave Cain a mark so that no one who found him would kill him. It is then said that Cain left God's presence, and lived out the rest of his days in the land of Nod. Getting back to the rock slab found in the Temple of Nod at the end of the First Tiberian War, this is the first real indication that Cain may be more than he seems. Perhaps it's merely all a part of his mystique, a propaganda piece to give religious and historic weight to the Brotherhood's movement. But this is just the start.
It would be a sad error in judgment, General Solomon, to mistake me for a corpse.
My judgment is sound, Kane, and I'm not afraid of ghosts or you.
In the next game Westwood released, Command & Conquer Red Alert, we see a conflict in an alternate timeline wherein the infamous Führer himself was erased from history, and the Soviet Union becomes the primary antagonistic force against an allied Europe in World War II. But curiously enough, if you play the Soviet campaign, a certain bald, bearded advisor can be seen whispering in Stalin's ear in various cutscenes. There's more shown of Kane in this game at the end of this campaign, but we'll come back to that when we discuss the Brotherhood of Nod as a whole. The bottom line is, Kane is shown over 40 years prior to his appearance in the original Command & Conquer, and he hasn't aged a day. Now, to be fair, the real-life actor Joe Kane also seems to be blessed with this condition. So, how has Kane been alive and youthful for so long? Well, there's one major hint to Kane's true nature in the C&C games. A pretty infamous one found in Westwood's sole attempt at a first-person shooter interpretation of this universe. A 2002 release called Command & Conquer Renegade. In this game, you play as Nick Havoc Parker, a GDI commando tasked with rescuing kidnapped GDI scientists and stopping Kane's Regenesis project, a project aimed at creating super soldiers through Tiberium experimentation. I can only assume this is what leads to the nod Tiberium cyborgs in the Tiberian Sun era. In the final level of the game, Havoc infiltrates the battered and ruined Temple of Nod at Sarajevo, Eastern Europe, looking for the last kidnapped GDI scientist. In the underground levels of the temple, Havoc can come across a certain hidden room holding what looks like a coffin or sarcophagus of some sort, which is flanked by 2 Tiberium crystals. Etched on the wall are various hieroglyphics that the internet assures me is a meaningless texture often used in other video games. But the letters in the center of the wall, and on the sarcophagus itself, however, seem to be written in legible Hebrew. There were a number of explanations of what these words meant floating around on old message boards on the internet, but to make certain, I consulted my mom, who was quite proficient in the Hebrew language. That's right, this is the same mom I talked to about the ending of the GDI campaign of Tiberium Wars. In other words, she's the best. Love you, Mom. Together with her language skills and my own research on the topic, we confirm that the wall text is taken straight from the Bible, Genesis 4:4 to be exact. And Hevel too brought from the firstborn of his sheep, including their fat. Adonai accepted Hevel and his offering. According to my mom, ancient Hebrew was written with only the consonants, leaving out the vowels. The word repeated 3 times on the sarcophagus is specifically the 3 Hebrew letters He, Vet, Lamet, or, in English, HVL, which together make up the root letters for any number of Hebrew words, once you fill in the potential vowels. Among these are vapor, vanity, foolishness, or Hevel, the original Hebrew name for the anglicized Abel. My mom posited that the word here might be foolishness, as an indictment of Cain's actions, seeing as how it was repeated 3 times, something that was often done in Hebrew writing for emphasis. Of course, if it's actually Hevel, aka Abel, then it points to the sarcophagus being the final resting place of the biblical Abel, which has incredibly far-reaching implications. Kane has some interesting things to say once you approach the sarcophagus, but again, I'm saving that for my video specifically on the Brotherhood of Nod and their religious beliefs. Again, this may be simply theater and propaganda for the brainwashed masses of Nod, but there remains the fact that Kane seems to have some measure of immortality, stretching back to the days of the first Red Alert and forward as game after game in the Tiberian timeline, Kane always seems to return to life after suffering mortal injuries that would kill any other man. Kane clearly is not just any normal human. Westwood seems to be implying that it may be because some higher power gave Kane a mark that would ensure that no one who found him would kill him. So, what exactly am I saying here? Who and what is Kane? Well, due to real-world events, there are actually 2 leading interpretations of Kane's true nature.
So, you're the new addition to the Brotherhood. Well, I'm Seth. Just Seth. From God to Cain to Seth.
Aside from all the evidence I've already shown, there is one more game in the Tiberian timeline that Westwood directly worked on before being folded into the studio EALA under Electronic Arts. Again, I will be ignoring a lot of important dialogue and lore bits here because I'm saving that for the Brotherhood of Nod video, but here's a few that I wanted to point out here for the purposes of figuring out who Cain is. First off, at the very end of the Tiberian Sun GDI campaign, Cain talks of the Tacitus, an alien data matrix that holds knowledge of Tiberium and extraterrestrial technology. Cain speaks of this knowledge with reverence.
The Tacitus told me of Tiberium missiles, of invulnerable flying ships, of real-time genetic mutation. More than alien, more than human. The next step in our evolution as a species.
Now, maybe this is just my read here, but he speaks of these things like a human would. Like he isn't already familiar with these concepts. He speaks of them with awe, like he just can't wait to unlock their secrets. Furthermore, he says that this knowledge is more than alien, more than human, the next step in our evolution as a species. Cain seems to be including himself when he's classing the human race. In future games under EALA, Cain seems only concerned with ascension, which we'll get to soon enough. But here, Cain seems like he's entirely drunk the Kool-Aid. He believes what he preaches to Nod in this era. He is entirely concerned with evolving humanity through Tiberium, as almost a duty to the species. In the same cutscene, GDI Commander Michael McNeil says this to Cain.
You're not God, Cain.
No, I'm not God. But I'm a close.
Notice that Cain doesn't scoff at the idea of God existing at all, as one might expect. Instead, he simply agrees that he's not God, but that he's a close second. In fact, maybe this is just me, but the way he smiles when he says that he's not God almost makes me think he's speaking like he knew God. I don't know, call me crazy, but Joe Kukan plays Cain here like he's just exuding that he knows more than McNeil knows about what he just said. Also, I thought I'd mention it here, Cain does make mention of the quote-unquote gods in a mission of the Nod campaign to delay the production of the Mammoth Mark II Walker.
Remind them whose side the gods are on.
But it's unclear if this is simply a turn of phrase or something he takes seriously. Perhaps other deities also exist or existed in this universe that Cain knows about? Or it's just that, a turn of phrase from someone who's been around for thousands of years of Earth's religious culture, stretching back to the days of polytheism. So, in summary, I think Westwood was entirely moving towards the revelation that Cain is in fact the literal Cain from the Bible who murdered his brother Abel. Now, that raises a lot of questions. Does that mean that the biblical God exists too in this universe? Or that some version of the story, whatever the details, happened in some shape or form? Is Cain under a curse to be immortal? To be unkillable by his fellow man? And for vengeance sevenfold to befall anyone who kills him? Well, these questions are hard to answer. Commander Michael McNeil doesn't suffer any repercussions for quote-unquote killing Cain at the end of the Second Tiberian War. His voice isn't heard when the Kodiak goes down during the Firestorm Crisis, and according to the Tiberium Wars novel, McNeil wasn't on board and went on to live a long life continuing to command GDI forces. And as far as I'm aware, the ion cannon from the First Tiberium War, well, I don't think it's ever faced any divine retribution. I have my own personal thoughts on this specific take on Cain's true nature, but first, we need to hear EALA's take on Cain.
When mine own army conspires against me, it is time to leave behind the insufferable race of animals who call themselves man, to escape this god-forsaken rock.
As mentioned previously, Cain in Tiberium Wars is a lot more focused on ascension, a mysterious new prophecy that seems to indicate that he and all the faithful of Nod will experience a rapture of sorts to escape the dying world of Earth. Every move he makes in this era is single-minded to get the Skrin to Earth, allow them to build the Threshold Towers, and use them for his own purposes. The Threshold Towers, in this case, operating as a sort of giant portal to the Skrin homeworld. Furthermore, During the Skrin campaign, the Skrin Overseer seems to recognize Kane, claiming that he is already in the Skrin database, but that they know precious little else about him. Gaining further knowledge about Kane becomes their top priority, before they are sabotaged by the Foreman's ship AI, who just might be the most loyal AI in all of fiction.
Order dismissed.
All of this heavily implies that Kane is of extraterrestrial origin. In fact, this is all but confirmed at a cutscene from the Nod campaign of CNC4.
I have spent thousands of years trapped here working towards this. I found you people in mud huts. You were living in caves. I raised you to triumph. I guided you every step of the way. And now we're almost there. Once the TCN is online, you can have your planet back. And I can finally ascend.
So there you have it. According to EALA, Kane arrived thousands of years ago, waited for the arrival of Tiberium, and guided humanity until it had enough technology to summon the Skrin with an artificially induced liquid Tiberium explosion, allowing Kane to use the Skrin threshold towers to finally leave Earth and end his exile. You could even retcon Kane's goals in the Tiberian Sun era as him trying to use the world-altering missile to summon the Skrin. It all kinda fits. Even all the hints towards the biblical story of Cain and Abel can be explained away as Cain creating those stories himself, or at the very least, taking advantage of the story's existence to claim that he was the biblical Cain, all the while his true immortality being due to his alien nature. Now, either Westwood's or EALA's take can be taken to be canon, depending on what you vibe with. I find both cool in their own way, but I think I personally lean towards Westwood's original vision. There's just something inherently cool about Cain not being quite human, but not being alien either. He's something completely different. GDI are humans representing modern society and militaries. The Skrin are an alien race with technology beyond our understanding. But Cain, with the Brotherhood of Nod, represents something more ancient, more primal. Perhaps something more supernatural. Making Cain just another alien almost cheapens how mysterious and epic of a villain he is. In any case, I feel like CNC4 over-explained, where CNC3 left just enough mystery to keep Cain an unknown quantity.
Because my father actually played Cain before me, and his father played Cain before him. His father before him played Cain. His father before him was a plumber, but his father before him actually played Cain as well. So it's...
As I mentioned at the beginning, this first video on the Brotherhood of Nod was supposed to be about the First Tiberium War, as depicted in Tiberian Dawn. But the more I researched, the more bits and pieces of lore I found on everything prior to the 1990s in universe. I even found a short story by Isaac Asimov called Does a Bee Care? About an alien named Cain who lives for thousands of years on Earth, guiding humanity to scientific breakthroughs before ascending to leave the planet to start the cycle anew. There's no concrete evidence that either Westwood or EALA based CNC's Cain off of the story, but I thought I'd at least mention it, since even Wikipedia claims that it was an inspiration, with no cited source. All that to say, it's been both exhausting and fascinating to dive this deep into Cain's origins. I said it before in my Tiberian Sun video, but I don't think Command & Conquer, and especially the Tiberium universe, gets enough credit for its story and world building. It's one of the most fascinating sci-fi worlds in all of fiction, and it still feels like hardly anyone knows about it. I'm curious in the comments, which version of Cain's origin do you find more interesting? And for now, this ends the first in my series on the Brotherhood of Nod. Next time, we'll be diving more deeply into the Brotherhood's activities prior to the 1990s, as well as attempting to nail down specifically its religious and political beliefs. Thanks for watching, guys.
Look, in all seriousness, I've always said, and will continue to say that Command and Conquer fans are the most loyal. The core fans have been very vocal in support and criticism about what works and what doesn't work. So I think we really have just the greatest fan base ever. I've always been really, really flattered and humbled and quite frankly surprised by the sheer number and enthusiasm of the Command and Conquer fans out there.